The mystery of the little girl found strangled in the basement of her house.
Police continue their investigation into the murder of 6-year-old JonBenét Ramsey,
whose body was found the day after Christmas in her family's Boulder home.
Hello.
Nearly 30 years later, the JonBenét Ramsey case still ignites fierce debate with a strange twist.
The story of JonBenét is still just as interesting 28 years later because the same questions we asked then are still being asked today.
Given the pressure that the attention that's been given to it the last couple, 3 weeks, I think has driven home that we're serious. We want you to do everything that can be done.
From police media to internet sleuths point to her own family. Yet, no side has fully or definitively answered. What motive could drive them to kill the little girl who brought them fame and pride? Could a hidden factor, present in us all? The psychological issues explain this obsession. Hollow. Psychological turmoil within families can ignite devastating acts of violence, and the JonBenét Ramsey case stands as a haunting example of this dark potential. In 1996, 6-year-old JonBenét, a child beauty queen, was brutally murdered in her Boulder, Colorado home, thrusting her family into a maelstrom of suspicion and scrutiny. Each family member exhibited troubling psychological signs that fueled theories about their roles in the tragedy. Burke, only 9, displayed social isolation and alleged scatological behavior, retreating into his own world as the family's focus shifted elsewhere. Patsy grappled with emotional volatility, relying on sedatives to cope, her obsession with JonBenét's pageant success amplifying her instability. These psychological undercurrents, some speculate, converged to make JonBenét's death an indirect consequence of the family's collective dysfunction, as if the 6-year-old, through no fault of her own, triggered a catastrophic unraveling. Yet, you might wonder why John Ramsay escapes mention here. Despite his enigmatic absence from key moments of suspicion and his direct implication in allegations of JonBenét's abuse, raising questions his role as the family's linchpin in this tragedy. How could an innocent child, caught in this web of psychological distress, unwittingly become the catalyst for such a devastating outcome? During the tenure as the Ramsey family housekeeper from 1993 to September 1995, Linda Wilcox observed Burke Ramsey, then 7 years old, navigating a household fraught with emotional distance and shifting parental priorities that likely contributed to early psychological pressures. As JonBenét's older brother, Burke was initially the focus of his mother Patsy's attention, described as her first project, when she devoted time to his school activities. However, after Patsy's recovery from cancer, her focus shifted dramatically to JonBenét, particularly as the younger sibling began participating in beauty pageants and garnering public attention. This shift left Burke receiving less parental focus, a change that coincided with the cessation of his bedwetting, which he had experienced until age 6, suggesting that the loss of attention may have influenced his emotional state. Wilcox noted that both John and Patsy were lazy in addressing their children's bedwetting, indicating a lack of proactive parenting that left Burke feeling neglected, fostering early signs of psychological strain in a household lacking emotional warmth. Burke's social behavior further reflected the pressures of his environment, as he was described as living in his own world, with his life revolving around friends and sleepovers outside the Ramsey home. Unlike JonBenét, who occasionally had friends over, Burke did not host sleepovers, a detail Wilcox found odd and suggestive of a controlled or restricted home environment. This lack of reciprocal social engagement at home, possibly driven by Patsy's intense focus on JonBenét's pageant activities or a desire to shield the family from external scrutiny, likely deepened Burke's sense of isolation. His primary social circle was his friends, indicating a degree of detachment from the family's dynamics, which Wilcox described as joyless except for JonBenét's exuberance. This emotional disconnect, coupled with the family's lack of affection, may have pushed Burke toward emotional self-reliance as a coping mechanism, a sign of underlying psychological stress at a young age. The Ramsey household's physical and emotional environment added to the pressures Burke faced. His bedroom, located next to JonBenét's original room with a shared bathroom, placed him in close proximity to his sister. But the redecoration that moved JonBenét to the pink room, which formerly was Melinda's, the first daughter of John and his ex-wife, equipped with a TV verificar for her pageant-related activities. It may have reinforced Burke's sense of displacement. A specific incident in the summer of 1995, when a painter removed window screens, left Burke unable to open his bedroom window for air, prompting concern from his grandmother Nidra about his safety. This episode, combined with a flooding incident in November 1995 that damaged his room, underscores the instability of his home environment, likely exacerbating feelings of insecurity. Nidra's protective role, particularly during Patsy's cancer treatment, suggests she was a significant figure in Burke's life, possibly compensating for his parents' preoccupation. But this dynamic may have further highlighted the lack of direct parental engagement, contributing to his emotional isolation. Burke's interactions with the Ramsay home's basement, where he played with his train set, also point to the psychological pressures of his environment. The basement, described as dark, damp, and cluttered, was a space JonBenét feared and Patsy rarely visited, yet Burke's familiarity with it set him apart from the family. This solitary activity in an uninviting area, where JonBenét's body was later found, suggests Burke sought out spaces away from the family's focus, possibly as a retreat from the household's tensions. The emotional toll of being overshadowed by JonBenét was evident in a poignant moment at Walmart, where Burke, observing people admiring JonBenét's Easter dress, asked Patsy, "Mom, am I fat?" This question revealed feelings of inadequacy and comparison, indicating that JonBenét's rising prominence in pageants intensified Burke's sense of being overlooked. The pressure to compete for attention in a family where JonBenét became Patsy's second project, an obsession likely contributed to psychological strain, manifesting in his social withdrawal and reliance on external friendships. Burke Ramsay was supposed to exhibit behaviors with knives that raised concerns about safety and potential danger within the Ramsay household. He owned a red Swiss Army knife, a gift from his mother, Patsy, purchased in Switzerland and personalized with his name or initials. This knife became a focal point in the investigation when it was found in the basement, several yards from JonBenét's body, near a sink in a hallway close to the wine cellar where she was discovered. Adding to the concern, the later housekeeper Linda Hoffman-Poog reported that Burke frequently whittled with his Swiss Army knife inside the family's Boulder home, leaving wood shavings scattered, particularly in the playroom. This careless use of a sharp tool indoors was deemed hazardous enough that Hoffman-Poog warned Burke she would confiscate the knife if he didn't clean up the mess. The behavior appeared to intensify or become more noticeable after September 1995. Burke's whittling, a seemingly innocent activity for a young boy, took on a darker significance when considered alongside the knife's discovery near the crime scene, hinting at a lack of supervision and the potential for dangerous misuse in a tense household environment. The red Swiss Army knife's journey from a hidden cupboard to the basement further heightened suspicions about Burke's knife habits. Hoffman-Poog, frustrated by the mess from Burke's whittling, hid the knife in a cupboard above a sink on the second floor, near JonBenét's room, without informing John or Patsy Ramsay. Its later appearance in the basement suggested that someone, possibly Burke, given his familiarity with the house, retrieved it from its concealed location. This movement implied that Burke had easy access to the knife, raising questions about how a 9-year-old's unsupervised handling of a sharp tool could intersect with the violent circumstances of JonBenét's death, even though the knife was not the murder weapon. Burke's own statements reinforced the perception of his knife use as potentially risky. In a 1998 interview with Detective Dan Schuler, he admitted to owning the red Swiss Army knife, confirming it bore his name, and acknowledging he used it for whittling and tying knots, a skill relevant to the garret's construction. His comfort with handling the knife for these tasks, typical of Boy Scout activities, underscored a lack of parental oversight that could be dangerous for a child his age. Additionally, Patsy revealed during her 1998 interrogation that Burke may have owned multiple knives, including a smaller one resembling a keychain, suggesting he had access to several sharp tools. While Patsy downplayed his whittling, limiting it to the playroom, the presence of multiple knives in Burke's possession increased the potential for hazardous behavior. In 1993, during his mother Patsy's battle with ovarian cancer, Burke smeared feces on a bathroom wall. An incident reported by former nanny housekeeper Geraldine Vadica in a 1997 police interview. Nadra Poff, Patsy's mother, instructed Vaca to clean up the mess, marking this as the only confirmed instance of Burke's scatological behavior. The stress of his mother's illness likely contributed to this act, suggesting an emotional outlet for a young boy grappling with family turmoil. This behavior, though isolated, was later cited by investigator James Kohler as evidence of Burke's psychological struggles, potentially intensified by the lack of parental attention during this period. Further indications of Burke's scatological tendencies emerge years leading up to 1996, though with less certainty. Housekeeper Linda Hoffman Poog recalled finding a grapefruit-sized mass of fecal matter in JonBenét's bed, initially attributing it to her known bedwetting issues. However, Kohler speculated this could have been Burke's. Given his earlier smearing incident and the unusual size of the feces for a 6-year-old girl, no forensic evidence confirmed this, and Hoffman Poog's account, given after she became a suspect, raises questions about reliability. Similarly, crime scene investigators found a pair of pajama bottoms in JonBenét's bedroom containing fecal material, believed to belong to Burke due to their size. This discovery, noted by Kohler, fueled theories of ongoing scatological behavior, but the lack of forensic testing and its exclusion from the final cut of a 2016 CBS documentary suggest it remains unverified. These incidents, while suggestive of a pattern, lack conclusive ties to Burke, highlighting the speculative nature of the claims surrounding his behavior. Investigators reported a box of candy, a Christmas gift, in JonBenét's bedroom also smeared with feces, as noted by Hoffman Poog in the CBS documentary, and by Kohler. This incident, lacking lab verification, is often linked to Burke as a possible expression of jealousy toward his sister's prominence. Additionally, during 1998 police interviews, questions arose about an unflushed toilet in JonBenét's bathroom and soiled toilet paper on the basement bathroom toilet tank lid, hinting at scatological issues in the household. Patsy attributed these to JonBenét's poor wiping skills, and no direct evidence tied them to Burke. Speculative claims, particularly online, exaggerate Burke's smearing, alleging he targeted JonBenét's toys and pageant items out of resentment, but no primary sources beyond the 1993 incident and the candy box corroborate such widespread behavior. The Ramsay family's lawyer, L. Linwood, has vehemently denied these allegations, underscoring their contested nature. Burke's violent behavior toward JonBenét is more limited but equally scrutinized. Approximately a year-half before JonBenét's death, Burke, then around 8, struck her in the face with a golf club, leaving a scar. Family friend Judith Miller reported that Patsy described this as Burke losing his temper, a detail echoed in the 2016 CBS documentary. This incident, the only documented act of violence by Burke against his sister, was not deemed intentional malice, but suggested a propensity for impulsive anger. The absence of further confirmed violent acts limits the evidence of a pattern, though investigators, like Kohler, point to this as indicative of underlying tensions, possibly fueled by sibling rivalry over parental attention. Burke Ramsay's unusual behaviors during his childhood in the Ramsay household, observed between 1993 and 1996, have been scrutinized through various psychological lenses, each offering insight into the complex interplay of family dynamics and individual responses. Psychological research suggests that significant stressors, such as a parent's life-threatening illness, can trigger regressive behaviors in young children, particularly those aged 6 to 9, like Burke. The The turmoil of Patsy Ramsey's ovarian cancer in 1993 created an emotionally chaotic environment, likely contributing to Burke's tendency to retreat to solitary activities in the basement or engage in impulsive acts. These behaviors may reflect an attempt to exert control or seek solace amid family disruption, aligning with symptoms of adjustment disorder with mixed disturbance of emotions and conduct, a condition marked by emotional and behavioral reactions to identifiable stressors. Though no formal diagnosis exists, this framework explains how Burke's actions could stem from the strain of his mother's illness and the family's emotional distance, rather than inherent pathology. Sibling rivalry offers another lens for understanding Burke's behaviors, particularly in a household where JonBenét's pageant success dominated parental attention. Psychological studies highlight that children who feel overshadowed by a sibling may resort to attention-seeking or aggressive behaviors as a means of asserting their identity. Burke's actions, interpreted as expressions of jealousy, could indicate underlying emotional distress, potentially resembling oppositional defiant disorder or transient conduct problems. The intense focus on JonBenét by Patsy and John likely exacerbated feelings of neglect, pushing Burke toward solitary or impulsive outlets. However, the lack of consistent evidence for a pervasive pattern of defiance limits the applicability of such a diagnosis, suggesting his behaviors were more context-driven than chronic. The possibility of trauma or exposure to a dysfunctional family environment further contextualizes Burke's actions. Psychological literature notes that children in high-stress or abusive households may externalize distress through regressive or aggressive behaviors, such as solitary play or impulsive acts. If Burke experienced or witnessed trauma, these behaviors could be manifestations of PTSD or less likely, RAD, reflecting emotional withdrawal or difficulty bonding. Yet, without evidence of direct trauma or severe neglect, these diagnoses remain speculative, and Burke's behaviors may simply reflect a child navigating a troubled home. The Ramsay household's lack of emotional warmth, as described by housekeeper Linda Wilcox, likely amplified Burke's need for private spaces or outlets, though no clinical records confirm a trauma-based disorder. Developmental psychology offers a counterpoint, suggesting that many of Burke's behaviors fall within normal ranges for a child his age. Solitary play, minor aggression, and even scatological incidents are not uncommon in young boys, particularly under stress, and may have been misinterpreted as pathological by investigators. Knife play, aligned with age-appropriate activities like Boy Scouts, and isolated aggressive acts could reflect typical exploration rather than serious disturbance. Studies emphasize that such behaviors often resolve without intervention, casting doubt on claims of a mental problem. As suggested by some experts, the absence of a formal diagnosis underscores the likelihood that Burke's actions were transient responses to his environment, not indicative of a chronic condition like autism spectrum disorder or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder or ADHD, which were speculated but unsupported by evidence. Investigative interpretations, particularly from James Kohler and the CBS documentary team, often framed Burke's behaviors as evidence of psychological disturbance, potentially linked to involvement in JonBenét's death. However, psychological research cautions against over-pathologizing childhood behaviors without longitudinal data, and Burke's actions during interviews, such as emotional detachment or discomfort, could reflect age-appropriate responses to grief or interrogation stress rather than guilt. The Ramsay family's legal team has contested these interpretations, arguing that investigators amplified normal behaviors to fit a narrative. Ultimately, Burke's behaviors are best understood as products of a dysfunctional household marked by stress, rivalry, and neglect, with no conclusive evidence pointing to a specific psychological disorder. His actions, while unusual, align more closely with situational responses than with enduring pathology, shaped by the intense pressures of his family environment. Another figure besides Burke Ramsay, who was also believed to have struggled with psychological issues, and even required therapy at times, was Patsy Ramsey. Many believe it all began with the cracks in her marriage to John Ramsay. Patsy Ramsey, born Patricia Ann Poff on December 29, 1956, in Parkersburg, West Virginia, emerged from a middle-class family with a strong social standing that shaped her life and marriage. Her father, Donald Ray Poff, was an engineer and manager at Union Carbide, providing the family with financial stability and a respected position in their community. Her mother, Nadra Ellen Ann Poff, was a dominator who steered Patsy and her sisters, Pamela and Paulette, toward beauty pageants, instilling a focus on social prominence and achievement. This emphasis on public image carried significant psychological weight for Patsy, as the expectation to uphold the Poff family's reputation likely fueled a drive for perfection and social validation. Her success as Miss West Virginia in 1977, earned while studying journalism at West Virginia University, amplified this pressure, thrusting her into a spotlight that demanded constant maintenance of a polished persona, a burden that followed her into her marriage and family life. The marriage between Patsy and John Ramsay, formalized on November 5, 1980, brought notable financial and social benefits that alleviated John's earlier struggles and set the stage for his professional ascent. Before meeting Patsy, John faced financial instability, having been fired from a sales job and navigating challenges with early business ventures like TechSpec and Microsoft. The Poff family's resources and connections provided a crucial lifeline. Donald Poff's establishment of Advanced Products Group in 1985, which later merged with John's ElectroSouth to form Access Graphics in 1989, offered John a stable platform to rebuild his career. This merger, likely bolstered by Donald's business acumen and financial backing, gave John a leadership role in a promising enterprise, easing the pressures of his prior financial difficulties and laying the groundwork for future prosperity. Patsy's social network, cultivated through her pageant success and the Poff family's standing in West Virginia and later Atlanta, further enhanced John's opportunities. Her status as Miss West Virginia opened doors to influential contacts, which likely facilitated business partnerships and investment opportunities for John in the years leading up to Access Graphics' formation. The Poff family's stable financial foundation, while not explicitly documented as direct cash infusions, provided an indirect safety net, allowing John to focus on entrepreneurial efforts without the immediate burden of financial ruin. This support was critical after his 1978 divorce from Lucinda Pash, which left him raising 3 children and managing personal financial strain. The marriage to Patsy, coupled with her family's resources, offered a stabilizing force that helped John overcome these challenges. One outstanding, the allegations of John's infidelity, particularly his affair with Gloria Williams in the late 1970s during his first marriage, was early known. John's own statements to investigators revealed that he admitted to this affair, describing Williams as an aggressive secretary who initiated the relationship at a Christmas party, likening her to a Fatal Attraction-style figure. John recounted tracking Williams down years later, sitting in an apartment complex parking lot for hours to see if she was still a threat, suggesting a lingering preoccupation with her potential to disrupt his life. In a 1998 police interview, John described the affair as a regrettable mistake, claiming Williams pursued him aggressively and that he was sucked in due to vulnerability. He recounted a specific incident where Williams arrived at his apartment while Patsy was there, cooking hamburgers, and John hid behind a door, leaving Patsy to handle the confrontation. Patsy, unaware of the affair at the time, reportedly deflected Williams by claiming their phone was out of order, effectively ending her pursuit. This incident, as John told investigators, marked a turning point, highlighting Patsy's significance to him. However, his narrative also suggests a pattern of avoiding confrontation, as he took credit for ending the affair, while later admitting Patsy's role was pivotal. This tendency to reframe events to minimize his responsibility, as seen in other instances like claiming credit for remodeling their home, could have left Patsy feeling undermined adding to her psychological strain as she navigated a marriage where her contributions were often overshadowed. Inside the house, to be precise for a specific event, Patsy Ramsey faced immense psychological strain during holiday preparations, as she shouldered the full weight of family and household responsibilities without support from her husband, John. The family, as housekeeper from 1993 to 1995, described how Patsy managed everything alone, from organizing events to upholding the family's polished public image, while John was rendered useless due to the effects of sleeping pills. This left Patsy to navigate the chaos of holiday logistics single-handedly, ensuring every detail aligned with the expectations of their affluent Boulder social circle. Moreover, Patsy Ramsey's intense involvement in JonBenét's beauty pageants consumed much of her energy, driven by a deep-seated desire to uphold family pride and social status. As Linda Wilcox observed, Patsy treated JonBenét like a project, meticulously managing her costumes, makeup, and performances to project a perfect image. This obsession was evident in a December 23, 1996, incident when Patsy insisted JonBenét wipe off excess makeup to appear more age-appropriate for a Christmas party, becoming visibly irritated when JonBenét resisted wearing a velvet dress. The pressure to maintain this flawless facade came with harsh public criticism, as many accused Patsy of imposing an overly sexualized, age-inappropriate image on her daughter. For instance, during Halloween 1994, when 4-year-old JonBenét declared she wanted to be a sexy good witch, Patsy embraced the idea, calling her a sexy witch, a choice Wilcox found disturbingly mature for a child. Psychological research from the Journal of Sports Psychology in the 1990s highlights how such parental roles in child competitions can lead to anxiety and perfectionism, as Patsy's relentless focus on JonBenét's appearance likely fueled self-doubt and exhaustion, pushing her toward sedatives to cope with the stress of public scrutiny and the need to maintain an impeccable image. Patsy's battle with ovarian cancer in 1993 left a profound psychological mark, reshaping her priorities and emotional state. Linda Wilcox noted that after her recovery, Patsy became obsessed with the disease, living in constant fear of its recurrence. Linda Hoffman-Poof corroborated this, recalling how Patsy frequently read books on illness and healing, anxiously attending checkups every 3 months, haunted by the thought she might not live to see her children grow up. This fear of mortality, as documented in psycho-oncology studies from the 1990s, often triggers anxiety and depression, amplifying emotional fragility. For Patsy, the cancer experience shifted her focus heavily toward JonBenét, particularly her pageant career, as a way to channel her energy and assert control over an uncertain future. The emotional drain of this preoccupation, coupled with the physical toll of treatment, likely deepened her reliance on sedatives to manage overwhelming fear and fatigue, as she struggled to balance her health anxieties with her demanding role as a mother. The Ramsey household's chronic disorganization added another layer of stress to Patsy's life, as described by Linda Hoffman-Poof, who worked as their housekeeper closer to 1996. She detailed a home littered with dirty dishes, open Ovaltine jars, peanut butter smeared on countertops, and scattered socks, shoes, toys, and books left by JonBenét and Burke. Patsy struggled with basic household tasks like laundry, often leaving clothes strewn about, ignoring Hoffman-Poof's suggestion to buy a laundry basket. Wilcox echoed this, noting Patsy's lack of emphasis on keeping the house tidy and her failure to teach her children to clean up after themselves. This chaos, as outlined in psychology and aging studies, can exacerbate stress for someone already burdened by family responsibilities, as Patsy's inability to maintain order likely heightened her sense of overwhelm, contributing to her sedative use as a means to cope with the relentless demands of an unruly household. Patsy's parenting style further compounded her psychological pressures, as she failed to instill responsibility in JonBenét and Burke. Hoffman-Poof described both children as spoiled. Especially JonBenét, she was not taught to tidy her belongings, leaving Hoffman-Poof to clean up after her. This lack of discipline, as per Journal of Family Psychology, can reflect a parent's emotional overload, as Patsy's focus on external achievements, like pageants, overshadowed teaching practical life skills. Her permissive approach likely stemmed from her own stress, diverting her attention from fostering responsibility and adding to the household's disarray, which further strained her mental resources. Patsy's prioritization of JonBenét's pageant image over her personal needs revealed a troubling disconnect in her parenting. Wilcox recounted a 1995 incident when JonBenét had chickenpox, and Patsy's primary concern was not treatment, but finding ways to conceal the marks for a photo shoot 3 days later, prioritizing her daughter's appearance over her health. Similarly, JonBenét's lack of sleepovers with friends, unusual for a girl her age, suggested Patsy's tight control over her social life, as Wilcox noted. This focus on performance over emotional connection left JonBenét for affection, receiving attention primarily when she excelled in pageants. Wilcox observed that JonBenét was largely ignored as a young child, except by her nanny, Suzanne Savage, until her pageant success made her Patsy's obsession. Patsy's obsession with perfection extended beyond pageants to her personal image and health. The Walmart dress incident, where Patsy and Nadra were outraged to find a $90 dress identical to JonBenét's sold at a discount store, underscored their festivity and status, as Wilcox recalled. This sensitivity to perceived slights reflected Patsy's broader inability to tolerate imperfection, a trait Wilcox linked to her post-cancer mindset. Her fear of cancer's return dominated her life, as she immersed herself in health literature and frequent medical checkups, amplifying her anxiety. The cumulative effect of these pressures: managing a chaotic household, parenting without fostering responsibility, prioritizing JonBenét's pageant image, and grappling with cancer's lingering shadow, aligned with American Journal of Psychiatry findings on chronic stress and medication dependence. Patsy's sedative use likely served as a desperate attempt to dull the overwhelming anxiety and emotional instability that defined her daily struggle to maintain control in a life fraught with unrelenting demands. The rise of the pressure that the time Patsy suffered cancer led to her reliance on sedatives to manage overwhelming stress and emotional turmoil. The use of sedatives, while offering temporary relief, carries significant risks that underscore the dangers of relying on such medications. They can also exacerbate underlying mental health issues, masking symptoms of anxiety without addressing their root causes, potentially worsening Patsy's emotional volatility. Mindfulness practices and support groups can also alleviate stress by fostering emotional resilience, offering Patsy a healthier path to navigate her pressures. Controlling sedatives is critical, as their temporary relief comes at the long-term psychological and physical harm, underscoring the need for non-pharmacological interventions to address the root causes of distress. The psychological issues surrounding both Burke and Patsy Ramsey have often been cited as part of what may have led to JonBenét's death, but this wasn't the first time a family tragedy in America spotlighted mental instability as a root cause. A more recent and equally shocking case was that of Chris Watts. On August 13, 2018, in Frederick, Colorado, Chris Watts reported his pregnant wife, Shannon, and their 2 daughters, Bella and Celeste, missing from their family home. Shannon, a vibrant social media presence who frequently shared her family's life online, had returned from a business trip that morning. By the afternoon, concern grew when she didn't respond to calls or texts. Police conducted a welfare check, finding no signs of forced entry but an eerily quiet house. Shannon's purse, phone, and car were still at home, raising alarms. Over the next few days, Chris appeared on local news, pleading for their safe return, projecting the image of a devoted husband and father. However, inconsistencies in his story led to his arrest on August 15, 2018, after he confessed to investigators. The case drew intense media scrutiny, fueled by the contrast between the family's idyllic online image and the hidden tensions that unraveled behind closed doors. The Watts family's life, like the Ramsays in 1996, was marked by a facade of perfection that masked deeper psychological strains. Chris Watts, supposed to face intense psychological pressures within his marriage, driven by a dynamic of control and dependency that mirrored, in some ways, the strains in Patsy Ramsey's life. Shannon was the dominant figure in their relationship, managing the household, finances, and their public image through her social media presence, which showcased a seemingly perfect family life. Chris, described by friends and family as reserved and conflict-averse, often suppressed his emotions to maintain harmony. Psychological research from Family Process in the 2010s suggests that such dynamics, where one spouse exerts significant control, can foster resentment and a sense of entrapment in the other. For Chris, this manifested in feelings of being overshadowed, as Shannon's assertive personality and their financial struggles, exacerbated by her business ventures and his supporting role, created a pressure cooker of unresolved tensions. Unlike Patsy, whose emotional isolation stemmed from John's detachment and her own burdens, Chris's stress was compounded by his inability to voice discontent, leading to a bottled-up frustration that simmered beneath his compliant exterior. Patsy Ramsey's psychological pressures, while intense, differed in their expression and impact. Her marriage to John was marked by emotional distance, with John's aloofness and alleged past infidelity leaving her to manage the household and children alone. Her deep involvement in JonBenét's pageants, driven by a need for social validation, brought public criticism and personal exhaustion, as noted by housekeeper Linda Wilcox. Patsy's 1993 ovarian cancer diagnosis further amplified her anxiety, with a lingering fear of recurrence dominating her thoughts, as Linda Pouve observed. Psychological studies from psycho-oncology in the 1990s highlight how such chronic stressors can lead to emotional fragility, often managed through sedatives, as Patsy likely did. However, these pressures, while overwhelming, lacked the volatile resentment that characterized Chris Watts' situation, as Patsy's coping mechanisms leaned toward suppression rather than explosive rebellion. Burke Ramsay, only 9 at the time of JonBenét's death, faced psychological pressures shaped by his family's dysfunctional dynamics. The Ramsay household high expectations on appearances, with Patsy's focus on JonBenét's pageants often sidelining Burke, as Wilcox noted her shift in attention post-cancer recovery. Unlike Chris, whose suppressed emotions built toward a breaking point, Burke's youth and lack of documented aggressive behavior indicate his pressures were more about navigating a chaotic home than harboring destructive motives. The absence of physical evidence linking him to the crime further weakens theories of his involvement. Chris Watts' motives were deeply tied to his personality and pre-existing tendencies, setting his case apart from the Ramsays. Psychological analysis, like those discussed in Denver's 7 interviews with experts, describe Chris as a man who concealed his true feelings, presenting a facade of compliance while harboring resentment. His affair with a co-worker, revealed during the investigation, pointed to a desire to escape his controlled life with Shannon. This betrayal, coupled with financial strain and his discomfort with Shannon's dominance, created a psychological profile prone to drastic action. Journal of Personality and Social Psychology studies from the 2010s suggest that individuals with suppressed emotions and a need for control can act out in extreme ways when pushed to a breaking point. Chris's reserved nature masked a latent capacity for detachment, evident in his calm demeanor during media appearances, which contrasted with the emotional turmoil he later admitted to investigators. In contrast, Patsy and Burke's psychological pressures, while significant, lacked the catalyst for such extreme actions. Patsy's stressors, her loveless marriage, pageant scrutiny, cancer fears, and household chaos, drove her to sedatives, not violence, as her coping mechanism was inwardly focused, per American Journal of Psychiatry findings on medication dependence. Her emotional volatility was more about maintaining appearances than lashing out, and no evidence suggests a history of uncontrolled rage, as Burke himself noted in a 2016 Dritter Phil interview, denying any parental violence. Burke, at 9, was too young to harbor the complex resentments Chris developed, and his documented behavior showed no signs of the premeditation or emotional concealment seen in Watts. The Ramsay case's ransom note and lack of forced entry fueled speculation, but Dunn evidence from an unidentified male on JonBenét's clothing, as noted in a 2008 Boulder DA statement, points away from family involvement. The psychological motives in the Watts and Ramsay cases diverge sharply due to the individuals' personalities and contexts. Chris's actions were driven by a toxic mix of suppressed emotions, an affair, and a need to reclaim control, amplified by his pre-existing tendency to hide his true self, as seen in his calculated media appearances. Patsy's pressures, while intense, were channeled into perfectionism and sedation, not destructive acts, as her focus remained on upholding the family's image. Burke's youth and lack of violent history make his involvement implausible, especially given the absence of physical evidence. Unlike Chris, whose latent detachment and infidelity provided a clear motive, neither Patsy nor Burke exhibited the psychological profile or circumstances to precipitate such an act. The Ramsay case's unresolved nature and DNA evidence further suggest an external factor, contrasting with the clear internal collapse in Watts's psyche, making it unlikely that Patsy or Burke's pressures culminated in JonBenét's death. John Ramsay's problems? Was John Ramsay suffering any psychological problem like Patsy or Burke? John Ramsay was shaped by intense pressures to maintain a flawless public image, a burden that weighed heavily as he navigated his role as a successful CEO and family patriarch. As head of Access Graphics, a company that soared to over $1 billion in revenue by 1996, John was expected to uphold the Ramsay family's affluent, polished persona in Boulder's elite social circles. Linda Wilcox observed that Patsy, influenced by her mother Nedra Powell, prioritized appearances, placing John under scrutiny to project success through their lavish lifestyle, including $1 million home and JonBenét's pageant career. His composed demeanor in media appearances, as noted in web sources, masked private tensions, reflecting a need to control public perception. Psychological research from the Journal of Social Psychology in the 1990s suggests that such demands can lead to chronic stress and anxiety, as individuals suppress personal struggles to meet societal expectations. For John, this pressure likely fostered a guarded approach, but his emotional detachment, as Wilcox described, indicates he coped by withdrawing rather than acting out destructively, offering no psychological motive to harm JonBenét. John's business pressures were equally intense, compounded by rumors of questionable career advancements that shadowed his rise to prominence. Before marrying Patsy in 1980, John faced financial struggles and professional setbacks, including being fired from a sales job and challenges with ventures like TechSpec and Microsoft. His ascent to CEO of Access Graphics, formed in 1989 through a merger with Donald Poff's Advanced Products Group, was seen by some Poff family connections, rather than pure merit. Speculation about shady advancements grew with his promotion after Lockheed Martin acquired Access Graphics, with whispers of past embezzlement from earlier companies like ElectroSouth, though no concrete evidence exists. Web sources, including a 1998 Conformist article, fueled rumors that Access Graphics served as a CIA front, citing its Lockheed Martin ties and proximity to defense-related research at the University of Colorado Boulder. These claims, alleging unexplained revenue and covert projects, lack substantiation, but added to John's stress. Journal of Occupational Health Psychology studies highlight how such professional scrutiny can lead to anxiety and imposter syndrome. Yet these pressures were unrelated to JonBenét, focusing on reputation and career stability, not family conflict. Rumors about Access Graphics extended to darker allegations, further complicating John's psychological landscape. A 1997 The Star article claimed investigators found child filth on company computers, a sensational accusation that John did not publicly refute. Unlike other claims he contested through lawsuits, Reddit discussions speculated this silence implied guilt, though no official police reports or credible sources corroborate the story, and the Star's tabloid nature undermines its reliability. Another rumor linked the case to Lockheed Martin, with some interpreting the ransom note's mention of a small foreign faction and a London 8 hours demand, matching John's bonus, as tied to corporate intrigue or a disgruntled ex-employee, Jeff Merrick, whom John fired. Merrick's ethics complaint against John and Don Poff, documented in Perfect Murder, Perfect Town, suggested possible revenge, but no evidence connects him to the crime. These rumors, while speculative, likely heightened John's anxiety about his reputation. As Journal of Social Psychology notes that public accusations can amplify stress, yet they remain disconnected from any motive to harm JonBenét. John's emotional distance from his family added another layer of psychological strain, rooted in his controlling yet detached demeanor. John's parenting reflected this detachment. Wilcox noted he gave JonBenét little affection until her pageant success and used routines, like giving her a bottle at age 4 to avoid conflict. These behaviors point to a need for control, but there is no evidence they translated into aggression toward JonBenét, as his coping mechanism was avoidance, not confrontation. The psychological pressures John faced, maintaining a perfect family image, navigating business scrutiny and rumors, and emotional distance, do not provide a motive for harming JonBenét. Journal of Family Psychology research suggests motives for such acts typically involve intensement or desperation, which John's stressors lack. His business pressures were resolved by access graphics, success, and rumors, while stressful, were speculative and unrelated to JonBenét. His emotional detachment, while straining family dynamics, leaned toward withdrawal, not violence. The 2008 Boulder DA's statement, citing DNA evidence from an unidentified male on JonBenét's clothing, further supports his non-involvement. John's psychological profile, marked by control and avoidance, aligns with managing stress through detachment, not extreme actions, rendering rumors and pressures insufficient to suggest a motive for such a crime. The lack of clear causes has led many to posit other theory about John Ramsay's motives, the theory of abuse. The hypothesis that JonBenét Ramsey was a victim of abuse prior to her death has been a persistent and controversial theory in the investigation of her murder. This speculation stems primarily from the autopsy findings, which noted private area trauma on the night of her death. The findings have fueled debates among experts, with some suggesting that the trauma could indicate a single incident tied to the murder, while others argue it might point to prior abuse. Medical records from JonBenét's pediatrician, Dr. Francesco Beef, provide another layer to this hypothesis. Over a 3-year period, Dr. Beef's office 33 times, an average of nearly 1 visit per month, which some analysts find unusually high for a child of her age. Among these visits, one was specifically noted for private area, a condition that can sometimes be associated with irritation, or in rare cases abuse. Dr. Beef, however, maintained that he saw no signs of abuse during any of these visits, emphasizing that JonBenét's health issues were typical childhood ailments like colds, sinusitis, and respiratory infections. Critics of this stance argue that private area in a young girl, especially when coupled with frequent medical visits, could warrant further scrutiny. The fact that Dr. Beef cited doctor-patient privilege and was reluctant to engage fully with police interviews has raised suspicions among some investigators, who wonder if critical information was withheld, intentionally or otherwise. The police presentation in June 1998, led by Detective Jane Harmer, added significant weight to the abuse hypothesis. After 18 months of investigation, Harmer presented evidence suggesting prior private area trauma, supported by experts who compared anatomical images of JonBenét to those of a healthy 6-year-old girl. The visual differences were described as apparent even to non-experts, with some specialists concluding that the trauma was consistent with chronic abuse, rather than a one-time event. This presentation directly contradicted Dr. Biff's assertions, creating a divide between law enforcement's interpretation and the pediatrician's first-hand observations. The police's reliance on expert opinions and visual evidence has been cited as a compelling argument for the hypothesis, though the lack of a definitive medical consensus leaves room for doubt. The absence of detailed documentation from these experts in public records further complicates the interpretation of this evidence. JonBenét's participation in child beauty pageants has also been scrutinized as a potential factor contributing to the abuse hypothesis. The pageants, which involved elaborate costumes, makeup, and performances that some critics describe as overly adult-like, placed JonBenét in a highly visible and potentially vulnerable position. Some theorists argue that the pageant environment could have exposed her to inappropriate attention or grooming, either from individuals within the pageant circuit or closer to home. The intense schedule, particularly in 1996, when JonBenét competed in multiple events, is said to have created stress that may have manifested in her frequent illnesses. It was suggested that this stress could have compromised her immunity, potentially masking or exacerbating signs of abuse. While no direct evidence links the pageants to abuse, the cultural context of child beauty pageants has been used to argue that JonBenét was an environment ripe for exploitation. Another piece of evidence fueling the hypothesis is the revelation that JonBenét was seeing a therapist. As noted in Steve Thomas's book JonBenét, Inside the Ramsay Investigation, the fact that a 6-year-old was receiving therapy raises questions about her emotional and psychological state. When police attempted to contact the therapist, they were directed to the Ramsay family's attorneys, suggesting a level of secrecy that has been interpreted as suspicious. The purpose of the therapy remains undisclosed, but some speculate it could have been related to behavioral or emotional issues stemming from abuse. The lack of transparency from the family, combined with their overall uncooperative stance with law enforcement, has been cited as indirect support for the injuries documented in JonBenét's medical history, beyond the autopsy findings, also play a role in the abuse hypothesis. A notable incident occurred in August 1994, when JonBenét was struck in the face with a golf club, resulting in a scar on her left cheek. This injury, recorded by Dr. Biff during a checkup in October 1994, was described by Judith Phillips, a family acquaintance, as non-accidental. Based on a conversation with Patsy Ramsey, the lack of detail in Dr. Biff's records about who caused the injury has been flagged as suspicious, with some suggesting it could indicate a pattern of physical harm that might extend to abuse. Other injuries, such as a bruised nose from a fall in May 1995 and a bent fingernail in May 1996, are less directly tied to the hypothesis, but contribute to the narrative of a child experiencing frequent physical mishaps, which some interpret as signs of a troubled environment. The behavior of the Ramsay family, particularly their lack of cooperation with law enforcement, has been a significant factor in sustaining the abuse hypothesis. According to Steve Thomas, the family refused immediate police interviews and instructed friends and associates not to provide information to investigators. This reluctance, coupled with Dr. Biff's limited cooperation, has been interpreted by some as an attempt to protect sensitive information, potentially related to abuse within the family. The fact that Burke Ramsay, JonBenét's brother, returned to school shortly after the murder without a police escort has been noted as unusual, suggesting a desire to maintain normalcy despite the gravity of the situation. While this behavior does not directly prove abuse, it fuels speculation that the family was hiding something significant, possibly to shield a member from scrutiny. The intense media scrutiny and public fascination with the case have also amplified the abuse hypothesis. The lack of a clear perpetrator, combined with the sensational nature of JonBenét's pageant involvement, has led to widespread speculation about her vulnerability. Some theories suggest that the family's wealth and prominence, tied to John Ramsay's role at Access Graphics, may have provided a means to conceal any wrongdoing. The absence of definitive evidence ruling out prior abuse has allowed these theories persist as investigators and the public grapple with the unanswered questions surrounding the case. The 1999 grand jury's recommendation to indict John and Patsy Ramsay for child endangerment and obstruction of justice, though not pursued due to insufficient evidence, has been interpreted by some as an acknowledgement that the family may have been complicit in allowing or covering up harm to JonBenét. The health issues JonBenét experienced, as documented in her medical records, are another point of contention. The 33 doctor visits over 3 years, coupled with incidents like the 3 phone calls from Patsy Ramsey to Dr. Beef on December 17, 1996, for undisclosed reasons, have been highlighted as potential red flags. It was argued that such frequent medical attention, particularly for conditions, could indicate underlying issues not adequately addressed by Dr. Beef. The fact that JonBenét missed a pageant on December 12, 1996, due to illness, yet did not visit Dr. Beef, suggests additional health concerns that went unrecorded. These gaps in the medical record have been used to argue that signs of abuse might have been overlooked or intentionally downplayed. The conflicting interpretations of the medical evidence have kept the abuse hypothesis alive. While Dr. Beef and other experts like Dr. Henry Lee and Dr. Werner Spitz found no evidence of prior abuse. The police presentation in 1998 and the opinions of some forensic experts suggest otherwise. The lack of consensus among professionals underscores the complexity of the case that can be interpreted in multiple ways. The absence of definitive proof, such as DNA linking a specific individual to prior abuse, has allowed speculation to flourish. The therapy sessions, the pageant environment, and the family's behavior all contribute to a narrative that, while not proven, continues to raise questions about what JonBenét may have experienced before her death. Assuming that JonBenét was the victim of abuse from John would give us a theory that fits the many inconsistencies in this case. The idea suggested that Burke Ramsay struck JonBenét in an accident, no aimed, leading to a cover-up orchestrated by John Ramsay to conceal prior abuse, hinges on a series of calculated actions driven by self-preservation. As an ex-CIA analyst skilled in deception and psychology, that the events unfolded logically, with each family member acting according to their interests. After returning home from a party, the Ramsay household was active late at night. Burke, likely still awake, went downstairs to snack on pineapple and play with his toys. The pineapple, found in a bowl with milk, suggests a simple act a child like Burke could manage, using pre-cut fruit from the fridge. JonBenét, hearing him, joined him downstairs, and they shared the snack. Their interaction turned contentious when JonBenét disrupted Burke's playtime in the basement, possibly with his trains. Frustrated, Burke, who had a history of behavioral issues, grabbed a nearby object, perhaps a flashlight, and struck her, not intending severe harm. When she didn't wake up, he tried to rouse her by poking her with train tracks before alerting his parents. John Ramsay, upon assessing the situation, realized JonBenét appeared lifeless, though she was not yet dead. Recognizing that an autopsy might reveal prior abuse, he devised a plan to protect himself. He sent Burke to his room with strict instructions to stay there, ensuring the boy's silence. John then manipulated Patsy, convincing her that Burke's actions could implicate the entire family, including the loss of their wealth and social standing. Panicked and trusting John's calm authority, Patsy agreed to participate in a cover-up to stage a kidnapping. John's true intent was to shift blame onto Patsy. Knowing that police would likely see through the ruse but suspect her alone, he instructed Patsy to engage in staging tasks, ensuring her actions left a trail of evidence. Meanwhile, John took steps to distance himself and Burke from the scene, carefully wiping down surfaces to remove their traces while leaving evidence tied to Patsy untouched. To further his plan, John performed an act of abuse using Patsy's paintbrush, anticipating that an autopsy would attribute any prior abuse to this incident. He deliberately chose an item associated with Patsy to implicate her further, unaware that medical examination could distinguish past abuse from the recent act. The staging escalated tragically when the murder, intended as part of the cover-up, became the actual cause of JonBenét's death. Patsy, believing JonBenét was already dead, was shocked and lacked full awareness of the plan's consequences. John initially planned the body to support the kidnapping narrative, using a suitcase from their son's room. However, he reconsidered, deeming it too risky, and instead decided to hide the body in a secluded part of the house. John shifted the plan to involve their friends, instructing Patsy to call them over under the pretense of needing support. The goal was to contaminate the scene with their presence, potentially allowing the Ramsays to cast suspicion on them if the kidnapping story failed. Patsy, still in a state of panic, followed John's directives, leaving behind incriminating evidence like the notepad used for staging. John ensured he had time to shower, eliminating any physical evidence on himself, while deliberately preventing Patsy from doing the same, ensuring her clothing and person retained traces that could implicate her. When police arrived, John handed over the notepad immediately, a calculated move to direct suspicion toward Patsy's involvement in the staging. Burke's role was minimal, but pivotal. His simple alibi, that he was asleep until hearing Patsy's distress, was easy to maintain, requiring little coaching. In contrast, Patsy's alibi was fraught with inconsistencies, as she was burdened with a complex web of lies she didn't fully understand. John's alibi was he claimed to be asleep, only emerging after Patsy's scream, a story with minimal details to trip him up. Burke's later interview, where he hesitated when shown a photo of the pineapple bowl, suggests he was unprepared for questions about that night, revealing a crack in his simple lie. The plan's success lay in its asymmetry. John protected himself and Burke while ensuring Patsy appeared culpable. The involvement of friends and the chaotic scene they created further muddied the investigation, aligning with John's strategy to deflect scrutiny. His ultimate goal was to shield himself from abuse allegations, using Patsy as the focal point of suspicion. The JonBenét Ramsey case, decades later, remains a haunting lesson in the hidden dangers of unresolved psychological pressures and family dysfunction, revealing how deeply personal struggles can ripple outward with devastating consequences. Patsy Ramsey's life was a crucible of emotional strain, driven by a loveless marriage marked by John's emotional distance and alleged infidelity, as described by housekeeper Linda Wilcox. The relentless demands of managing JonBenét's pageant career, coupled with public criticism for imposing an age-inappropriate image, pushed Patsy toward perfectionism and exhaustion, as noted in Journal of Sports Psychology studies from the 1990s. Her 1993 ovarian cancer diagnosis amplified her anxiety, with a constant fear of recurrence dominating her thoughts, as Linda Hoffman-Poog observed. The chaotic Ramsey household, littered with clutter and undisciplined children, further overwhelmed her, as she struggled to maintain order while neglecting to teach JonBenét and Burke responsibility. These pressures, per American Journal of Psychiatry, likely drove Patsy to rely on sedatives, a coping mechanism that masked but did not resolve her emotional turmoil. The case underscores chronic stress, left unaddressed, can erode mental health, creating a fragile family dynamic where tensions fester, potentially leading to unintended consequences. It serves as a stark reminder that psychological burdens, when ignored, can destabilize even most outwardly successful households, highlighting the need for open communication and professional support to prevent escalation. Burke Ramsey, only 9 at the time, faced his own psychological pressures within this dysfunctional environment, which the case illuminates as a cautionary tale. The Ramsey family's focus on appearances, particularly Patsy's obsession with JonBenét's pageants, often sidelined Burke, fostering feelings of neglect and sibling rivalry, as Wilcox noted. His lack of discipline, evident in scattered wood shavings from his scout knife, reflected a parenting gap that left him to navigate a chaotic home without guidance. Psychological research from Journal of Family Psychology suggests that such neglect can lead to emotional withdrawal or impulsive behaviors, as seen in Burke's odd interview responses, like reenacting a hit or showing detachment. Yet, a 1998 psychological evaluation found no violent tendencies, describing the Ramsays as a healthy, caring family. The case teaches that children, caught in the crossfire of parental stress, can internalize tensions in unpredictable ways, emphasizing the importance of fostering emotional security and addressing sibling dynamics to prevent long-term psychological harm. Families must recognize how their pressures impact young minds, ensuring children receive attention, and structure to mitigate the risks of unchecked emotional distress. John Ramsay's experience in the case offers a different, equally profound lesson about the perils of public speculation and unfair judgment. As the head of a successful business, John faced pressure to maintain a perfect family image, compounded by rumors of questionable career advancements tied to PA family connections, as discussed on A Candé Rose. Calm, his emotional distance, noted by Wilcox, and preoccupation with a past affair with Gloria Williams, revealed in 1998 interviews, fueled suspicions of deceit or abuse. Web sources and tabloid claims, like those in The Star about illicit access graphics, painted John as a figure hiding dark secrets, despite no evidence supporting these allegations. Journal of Social Psychology studies highlight how public scrutiny can amplify stress, forcing individuals to defend their character against baseless accusations. John's every action, his calm media demeanor, his avoidance of confrontation, was scrutinized as evidence of guilt or cover-up. Yet the 2008 Boulder DA's DNA findings from an unidentified male point away from his involvement. This teaches us the danger of rushing to judgment, as unproven theories can inflict lasting harm, turning victims into scapegoats without evidence. The Ramsay case challenges us to question the fairness of such accusations. Why do we so readily assume deceit in those under pressure, like John, when evidence is lacking? How just is it to label a grieving family as perpetrators based on speculation? Until a definitive conclusion emerges, Patsy, Burke, and John remain victims of loss, scrutiny, and a relentless public narrative. The case reveals the destructiveness of psychological pressures, as Patsy's and Burke's struggles show how family dysfunction can spiral. Yet it also warns against the cruelty of baseless accusations. Every attack on the Ramsays, from theories of abuse to corporate conspiracies, lacks substantiation, rendering them meaningless in the absence of proof. The lesson is clear: families grappling with internal strife deserve support, not vilification, and every individual warrants respect until facts, not guesses, tell the full story. The Ramsay case urges us to prioritize empathy and evidence over sensationalism, ensuring that psychological complexities are addressed with care and justice, not condemnation